Very good afternoon, dear participants and Dr. Ramurthy. So this is the last lecture in this module on nuclear reactions and production of radioisotopes. In this particular presentation, I will be speaking on the charged particle induced reactions for production of radioisotopes. So the charged particles that are commonly employed to produce radioisotopes purposefully useful in many applications are mainly protons, neutrons, and alpha particles. And I will be discussing some of the useful isotopes which you will find applications in subsequent lectures. So mainly these three light charged particles are used as a projectile for production of radioisotopes in accelerators. For example, you have the fluorine 18, which is produced by oxygen 18 PN reaction, 111 indium cadmium 111 PN reaction, gallium 67 by zinc 68 P2N reaction, thallium 201 by 203 thallium P3N, giving lead 208 followed by beta decay, 125 xenon and 123 xenon on PXN reactions on iodine 127. There are many other cases. In fact, the purpose of this lecture was that if you want to produce a particular isotope, then you will be able to decide which is the reaction which is most suitable for producing the particular isotope. Deuterium is also used as a projectile for some of the isotopes like sodium 22, magnesium 24, D alpha. You can have DPN, DN types of reactions. Alpha particles are used for like 111 indium, 95 technetium, 238 plutonium, 238 uranium alpha 4N. So mostly you will find for producing the useful radioisotopes, we use this light charged particle projectile. Why we cannot use heavy ion induced reactions? There are reasons for that. One is that, first of all, these heavy ions, when we use, for example, we have carbon beam. Now we don't have only 6+ carbon. The carbon beam will have 4+, 5+, 6+. So the currents come down for a particular charge state. Secondly, the excitation functions, that means the cross section versus energy of projectile become very broad because of the angular momentum involved in the reaction, and multiple channels are opened up. Like if you have carbon, then you can have carbon 12N, 2N, 3N, 4N. So there are a large number of radioisotopes produced, which some of them will be unwanted. So you have to really struggle to get only the particular isotopes of application. Whereas in the case of light charged particles, the excitation functions are narrow; they are not very broad. And at a particular energy, you may have one or maximum two isotopes produced. So these are the main reasons why. And thirdly, that you can have them in large beam currents because you don't have many charge states. So for example, proton, you have only one charge state. Alpha, you have only 1+ or 2+. So that's why you will find that most of the production of isotopes in accelerators using proton, deuterium, or alpha particles. Now, just to give you an idea that many a times you don't have to do probably a detailed experiment to find out at what beam energy you should use the radiation. And for that, there are you have to generate this. Theoretically, you can generate this excitation function. Excitation function means cross section versus energy of projectile. So for example, the cross section for PN reaction will go up and come down, and after some energy, the P2N reaction goes up. So now, based on this data generated using the theoretical codes like phase code or cascade code, you can generate this, and they are now quite close to experimental expectation functions. So you can suppose your radioisotope interest is PN reaction, then you can fairly choose the energy somewhere here where there is no other reaction happening. And so you can decide what is the projectile energy. For example, P2N reaction, you can use somewhere here, but then if you have a thick target, then this also can be formed. So these are the kind of simulations one can do a priori without doing the experiment. And most of the time, within 10 to 20%, the cross sections predicted by these codes are close to the experimental data. And they are very simple to do. These codes require an input about projectile target, mass number, atomic number, and the energy of projectile, their spins. So you can generate the cross-section for the formation of compound nucleus, and the de-excitation of compound nucleus is followed by a statistical model depending upon the excitation energy and different projectile particles that can be emitted. The code will calculate the cross-section for different channels. So they are very handy to simulate the excitation functions and help you in guiding what are the projectile energies that should use, what should be the thickness of the target we should be using, and all that. So you can look for such codes. They are available freely in the internet also. Now, when you do an experiment on production of radioisotopes using an accelerator, you are not able to irradiate the entire target with the projectile, because the projectile is available in the form of a very thin, very narrow beam. The diameter of the beam may be 1 to 3 millimeters, whereas the target can be of the order of 1 centimeter dia or even 1 inch dia. And so all the target atoms are not exposed to the projectile. And many a times you use a thin target. Why thin target? Because the projectiles will lose energy in the target. So if you want to do excitation function calculation, determination of excitation function, then the projectile should not lose much energy in the target. So the targets are thin enough, of the order of, let us say, milligrams per centimeter square, or in terms of thickness, they are sub-microns. So these targets, they are not very thick enough to stop the products. So usually to stop the products, you require a catcher foil, can be aluminum foil or so. So this is a projectile target and catcher combination. And if you are generating excitation function, you can have a series of them, target catcher combinations. If you want to produce them, then one set will do. At a particular energy, you can produce isotopes. So because of the very large energy loss in that target, based on this formula, mz square by E, this is the stopping power. So particularly with charged particles, you will have a heavy loss. So if you want to define energy in the target, then probably you have to use thin target. But if you want to just produce radioisotopes, then you can use thick target, where the beam may be stopped in the target. So the advantage of thick target for production will be that, suppose this is your input incoming beam energy. This is the cross section, let us say, excitation function for a particular isotope production. So if you use this as the initial beam energy and the beam stops in the target, then you get the entire cross section, cumulative cross section you get to produce radioisotopes. So the final output beam energy may be here, or the beam will stop, means the output is 0. So entire cross section over the beam energy will be used to produce radioisotopes. So that the function of the thickness in the catcher, your residues may be formed. So you have to use the entire target to separate the particular radioisotope. So both of them have their plus and minus. When you want to have high yield, use a thick target, you use the cumulative cross section. When you want the cross section for a particular isotope, then you can use this one. Here in this case, suppose you are interested in 2N product, then 1N also will be formed in the same target. So it depends what is your interest, in which isotope you are interested. Now coming to the formation of the radioisotope, the equation for the formation and decay of the radioisotope, N sigma I is the rate of formation and n lambda is the rate of decay. The usual notations are activity at the end of radiation will become n sigma I 1 minus e 1 lambda Ti, which is the saturation factor. The number of target atoms now in here will be per centimeter square. So how do you find out this? You can take the weight of this target and take the area. So weight by area will become number of milligram per centimeter square, and you can multiply by Avogadro number divided by the atomic mass number, you get the number of atoms per centimeter square. And for the measurement of beam intensity, number of particles per second, you have to put a Faraday cup here at the end. So the Faraday cup will give you the cumulative charge. So that you divide by time, that is the number of particles per second. If you measure the current in microampere or milliampere, then that itself tells you, like 1 microampere beam of a proton is 6.24 10 power 12 protons per second. So that is the idea, roughly how many particles per second are falling on the target. If you have a thick target, then there is no output beam, so you will not get a Faraday cup. Cannot put a Faraday cup here. Instead, you can measure you can have the target itself hanging, and so you can do this as the Faraday cup. So you have a outside enclosure at negative potential and take the lead from this target itself, which has to be conducted. So these are the things you have to take care while measuring the beam intensity. And the activity at the first of irradiation time will grow, as I discussed in the case of neutron-induced reaction. And typically in about 4 half-lives, you saturate the activity production. So roughly 1, 2, 3, 4 half-lives of the irradiation time will be sufficient to produce radioisotopes of interest. This is a typical setup for accelerator irradiation. If you are determining the excitation function, you have a thin target, when you can use a chamber, scattering chamber. This is the chamber at Trombay, a Fotia accelerator. You can have a scattering chamber where you put the target and catcher, and you can take the Faraday cup measurement from here. You can change different targets from the ladder from the top. If you have a thick target, you can put the target and catcher here at the end, just before the Faraday cup. So it depends upon whether you have a thin target or a thick target. And then in India, we have several medical cyclotrons for producing specific radioisotopes, PET isotopes, but a big facility has already been commissioned at VECC Kolkata, called the Medical Cyclotron Facility, for producing radioisotopes using charged particles. And some of the important isotopes that can be produced using this facility are here: gallium-67, 78.3 hours by zinc-68 P2N reaction. You use 28.5 mg proton, and the current will be of the order of 200 microamperes. Helium-201, 73.5 hours. You can use helium-203 P3N, giving lead-201, followed by beta decay to 201 helium. The energy of proton 28.5, 200 microampere current. Indium-111, 67.9 hours. 112 cadmium P2N, 28.5 mg proton. Fluorine-18, 1.8 hours. Oxygen-18 PN reaction. So these are some of the important radioisotopes that will be produced using this medical cyclotron facility at VECC Kolkata. Of course, there are now several medical cyclotrons, dedicated cyclotrons for producing PET isotopes in the country. The medical cyclotrons are producing PET pharmaceuticals by labeling the radioisotope with a particular molecule. For example, F18, you label with fluorinated fluorodeoxyglucose. You replace the F19 by F18. And for this, there is a dedicated automated radiochemical processing unit. So from the medical cyclotron, the irradiated H2O18 straight away is taken to this processing unit, and which dispensed out the maybe hundreds of millicurie of or few curie of F18, which can be put in the vials and sent to hospitals. The half-life of this is 109 minutes, 1.8 hours. So very quickly, within a half an hour or so, the processing unit will dispense out the activity and you can send them to hospitals. In fact, this is one area, there are a lot of job opportunities for PET operators and radiochemists. So those who are looking for a career in nuclear medicine, this is one of the very upcoming area where there is a lot of requirement in the country. Some of the important cyclotron-produced radioisotopes which are produced in cyclotrons are sodium-22. You have cobalt-57. They are not necessarily in medicine. They are produced in. They are useful in many other areas also. Like cobalt-57 is like a Mossbauer source. It decays to iron-57, and if you want to do structural investigations on molybdenum, on iron, you can use cobalt-57 source. Gallium-67, indium-111, iodine-123, helium-201, and these are the PET isotopes: carbon-11, nitrogen-13, oxygen-15, and F18, and palladium-103. So there are many more which are there. These are the half-lives, the mode of decay, and the reaction that is used to produce these isotopes. Okay, just to give you a feel of the numbers, what is the level of activity that one can produce in a charged particle irradiation? I have given you an exercise. A 0.01 centimeter thick magnesium foil is irradiated for 1 hour with deuteron beam of current 100 microampere. Calculate the activity of sodium-24 produced at the end of bombardment. This is a typical experiment in cyclotron where you want to produce the radioisotope of interest. Now the reaction is 26 magnesium D alpha, 24 sodium, and you want to know how much of sodium-24 will be produced using 100 microampere deuteron beam for 1 hour when you irradiate 0.01 centimeter thick magnesium foil. So you use this equation, activity and the variation, and sigma I, and that saturation factor. The cross section for this reaction at a particular energy of deuteron is 25 millibarn. Abundance of magnesium-26 is 11%, and the atomic weight of magnesium is 24.3. Density of magnesium 1.74 gram per cc. So how to calculate this n sigma I? N is the number of atoms per centimeter square. So you take the thickness of the foil, 0.01 centimeter, into density, 1.74 gram per centimeter cube. So this becomes the thickness in gram per centimeter square, multiplied by the abundance of magnesium 24.11, absolute terms 26. Then Avogadro number upon the atomic weight, this many atoms per gram of magnesium. So this gives you the atoms of magnesium 26 in this foil per centimeter square. So this becomes 4.742, it is about 19 atoms per centimeter square. The current is 100 microampere hour, 100 into 10 to the power minus 6 amperes. And here 1 ampere is 6.24 to the power 18 particles per second per ampere. And so it becomes ampere will cancel. It becomes 6.24 10 raised to 14 particles per second. So 10 to the power minus 6 into 100 into 10 to the power 18, 6.24 not 14 particles per second. The saturation factor 1 minus e raised to minus 0.693 into time of irradiation upon the half-life. They have to be in the same units, so 0.045. So activity, you just multiply this n sigma I and saturation factor, it becomes 3.33 and power 7 becquerels or 0.9 millicurie. So you see here, the kind of activity that you get in accelerator is very, very small compared to what you get in the irradiation in the reactor. So why? Because you have a limitation on the beam intensity you have a limitation on the amount of sample that you can irradiate, and the cross sections are also not very high. So let us compare the isotope production in a reactor and in a cyclotron in terms of the different parameters like amount of target. In a reactor, you can irradiate a large amount of the target material, so the number of atoms is very, very large. It can be grams. Whereas in cyclotron, only a limited amount. See, even if you take a thick target, there is no point, because only the initial thickness of the target will receive the beam. Beam will stop. So there is no point having a very thick target. You don't irradiate all of the atoms. So there's a limitation on the range of the projectile in the target. The specific activity in the reactor is very generally low, because you get the isotope of the same element. So you have a lot of carrier stable isotopes are there. So low specific activity. Whereas in cyclotron, you produce a different element which you can chemically separate, and therefore the specific activities are quite high. You get almost carrier-free radioisotope. So only whenever you need a carrier-free radioisotope, you have to go for cyclotrons, or even in reactors, there are specific routes. As I discussed the other day, you can produce some of them here. Number of targets at a time in a reactor, you can have several targets being irradiated simultaneously, because there are several irradiation positions. Whereas in a cyclotron, in one beam line, you can put only one of them at a time. Irradiation time can be kept very long. In some positions, you can keep for 1 year, for example, for cobalt production, for molybdenum for 1 week, like that, depending upon the half-life, you can irradiate for different length of time. Whereas in cyclotron, you cannot keep for long, because you are engaging the whole machine for that much time. So other users will not allow you to use it for a long time. The decay mode of radioisotopes in reactor production is beta minus, in cyclotron beta plus or electron capture, because you get neutron deficient products here, you get neutron rich products here. And so the cost of production in a reactor is quite low, whereas in a cyclotron, the cost of production is very high. So these are some of the parameters which you can compare for reactor and cyclotron production of radioisotopes. Okay, so this was about the production of radioisotopes in accelerators. Now I will just give you some of the other aspects of radioisotopes, like radioisotope generators are very, very useful in many applications. I already gave an example of a radioisotope decay chain, where a radioisotope is decaying to another isotope, which is also radioactive. A going to B, going to C, where A and B are radioactive. And so this is the parent, this is the daughter, and this is the end product. Now, if the parent half-life is longer than that of the daughter, then you have some sort of an equilibrium between parent and daughter. So if the half-life of parent is about 10 times that of the daughter, you say a transient equilibrium is established after about 3 half-lives of the daughter activity. So for example, you have 99 molybdenum, 66 hours, decaying to 99 M technetium, 6 hours, and the daughter is almost stable. End product is almost stable. So you can use this generator to use radioisotope 99M technetium using this. This is the cow, 99 molybdenum, from which you can milk the daughter. Another is when the parent is very, very long lived, more than 100 times the daughter activity, then you have a secular equilibrium. Means essentially secular means the activity of daughter becomes equal to that of the parent once the equilibrium is established. An example is 137 cesium, 30 years half-life, going to 137 M barium, 2.54 minutes half-life. And so the parent is very, very long lived compared to daughter. So you get equal activity of barium 137M every time. So after 10 minutes, you can milk it out from this. And after another 10 minutes, you have again same activity of barium. Suppose you have got a millicurie of 137 cesium, every 10 minutes you can get 1 millicurie of 137 m beryllium for years together. Another example is strontium 90, 28.5 years, decaying to yttrium 90, 64 years. Again, the half-life is more than 100 times of the daughter. And so you can have strontium 90 in a column. There are now crown ether based columns from which you can milk yttrium. And it is about, let us say, 2.6 days. So after every 12 days or so, you can milk same activity of yttrium 90 from this column. You can repeatedly generate the activity of daughter from the parent, which can be held in the column. So this is a cow and milk systems, molybdenum 99 N gamma, 98 N gamma, 99 molybdenum, or you can have fission moly also. So you can milk technetium 99M. The daughter grows from parent, attains equilibrium after nearly 3 to 4 half-lives. We can in fact calculate how much time exactly it will take. Thus, after every 3 half-lives of daughter, activity equal to or more than that of parent can be milked from the parent. These are the examples. In fission of uranium, strontium 90 you can get as a parent of yttrium 90. Fission of 235 uranium, 137 parent of 137 m barium. And in fact, 226 radium is another radioisotope which it decays to 222 radon, which you can use in some application. This is also a case of secular deuterium. And so, as a first of time, if this is the parent activity, which is not decaying within the time span of your interest, like these half-lives are years together. So for a few days or few months, there is no decay, but daughter activity will grow, reach a maximum, which you can milk it out. Again, daughter will grow, and subsequently, several cycles of daughter activity you can get from the generator. Okay, now I will just discuss some of the important radioisotopes that are used in many areas and how to prepare them. I just given some of the isotopes like tritium, carbon 14, sodium 22, phosphorus 32, sulfur 35, cobalt 60, iridium 192, molybdenum 99, gallium 67, helium 201, 123, iodine, and F18. There may be many more in the list, but just to give an example, how to produce, what are the methods you can produce are given. So preparation of some important radioisotopes like tritium. Tritium is a very, very useful isotope. Half-life 12.33 years. Tritium decays by beta minus to helium 3. In atmosphere, cosmic ray neutrons are bombarding nitrogen 14 to give you tritium. And in the cosmic neutron flux is 2.6 neutrons per centimeter square per second. But if you want to produce in the laboratory tritium, then you can use lithium 6, put it in the reactor, and then lithium 6N alpha, you can get tritium. And then you can separate tritium from the lithium compound very easily. So this is how you can produce tritium in the laboratory. And this tritium is used in hydrology or in a biological reaction pathways if you want to study. So a lot of applications that tritium finds. Carbon 14 is another isotope, 5730 years. It is a beta minus emitter, goes to nitrogen 14. In nature again, cosmic ray neutrons bombard nitrogen 14 and give rise to carbon 14 plus proton. Whereas in the laboratory, you can produce nitrogen 14 NP reaction. In a reactor, put some compound of like ammonium nitrate in the reactor, you get carbon 14. Or you can put aluminum nitride as a target. And this carbon 14 is used in carbon dating or in biology. You can use this as a tracer for many organic reactions also. Sodium 22 is a very useful isotope in positron annihilation spectroscopy. It is a 2.6 years half-life and decays by beta plus, not beta minus, 22 neon plus neutrino. and it is produced by magnesium 24 D alpha, sodium 22. So you irradiate magnesium metal in a cyclotron with neutron beam, dissolve it in dilute HCl, and then you can solution is electrolyzed at 12 volts between a platinum electrode anode and revolving mercury cathode. Sodium 22 goes to mercury as an amalgam is decomposed to yield a sodium hydroxide solution. So sodium 22 is available as sodium hydroxide solution, and which is used as a positron source. It's a half-life 2.6 years. So if you are doing positron annihilation spectroscopy, or if you want to use this as a source for timing spectroscopy, you can use it. Another isotope is phosphorus 32, 14.28 days, decays by beta minus to sulfur 32. And it is produced by neutron induced reaction on phosphorus 31, P31 N gamma P32. On red phosphorus, so radiophosphorus can be converted into, let us say, P2O5, and so or PCl3 or POCl3. But this phosphorus 32 is not carrier free, it will contain phosphorus 31. And if you want to get phosphorus 32 carrier free, then sulfur 32 NP reaction gives you phosphorus 32, and you can separate chemically. But then there will be a contamination from phosphorus 33, which is 25 days half-life, because it is formed with sulfur 33 NP reaction. So there will be always there is a cost involved with carrier-free production of phosphorus 32 in terms of another activity of phosphorus 33. And this phosphorus 32 is used in agriculture. If you want to use this fertilizer uptake studies in agriculture, how the phosphate fertilizers are taken up by the plant, you can do research using this as a tracer. Similarly, 35 sulfur, 87.5 days, decays beta minus to chlorine 35, and it is produced in the reactor by chlorine 35 NP reaction, sulfur 35. Again, it is a carrier free, and you can separate, from sodium chloride irradiation, you can get sulfuric acid labeled with sulfur 35. This sulfur 35 is used in biology. Molybdenum 99 is produced by two routes. One of them is N gamma, 98 molybdenum N gamma. We irradiate molybdenum oxide in the reactor. If you irradiate 1 gram of molybdenum 98, then you get 800 millicurie. So per gram of natural molybdenum, you get 800 millicurie. You irradiate for 1 week at a neutron flux of 5×10⁻³ neutrons per centimeter square per second. So many a times, it is not a very useful product if you are having this low specific activity molybdenum 99. So fission moly is a very good alternative to N gamma moly, wherein you radiate uranium aluminum alloy having to 35 enrichment up to 20%, radiate it in the reactor, and then you can do the chemistry of molybdenum from the irradiated uranium target. Typically, you get 20 curie of molybdenum 99 per gram of uranium aluminum alloy. It is produced in 7 days irradiation of same flux as above. And now you see this molybdenum 98 that you get in fission had a specific activity more than 1000 curie per gram of molybdenum. So you can see the specific activity of fission produced molybdenum is almost 1000 times that of the N gamma molybdenum. So if you want very high specific activity, so essentially, when you will milk a technetium 99, your isotope of interest is 99 and technetium. If you have N gamma moly, you probably may need a large volume to milk a 99M technetium. If you have fission moly, in a very small volume of eluent, you get large activity of technetium 99. And so you put the molybdenum 99 in the column and go on milking technetium 99 every 24 hours. So you can use this for a week. You can have this in a hospital. So BRIT will supply the technetium molybdenum column generator, and hospitals can go on milking technetium every day for a week. Next Monday, you get another consignment. Cobalt-60 is very, very useful isotope. In fact, there is a huge demand for cobalt-60 for many, many applications. You will get to know this subsequent lectures. 59 cobalt N-gamma, 60 cobalt, cross-section 37 bonds, half-life 5.27 years. Irradiation of 1 gram of cobalt in a flux of 5^13 for 2 years gives about 114 curie of cobalt-60. For teletherapy, you need about more than 200 curie per gram. For radiation processing plants, you get 100 to 150 curie per gram. So depending upon the requirement, and in India, the cobalt-60, so in the nuclear research reactor, you don't have that much of space to radiate large quantity of cobalt for a long time. So nuclear power reactors are used to produce cobalt-60. Iridium-192 is another very useful isotope having half-life 73 days. It is a gamma source for gamma radiography or even brachytherapy. In radiography, cameras require 100 curie of iridium-192, or in brachytherapy, 192 iridium as a wire, few millicurie per centimeter. It is produced by iridium-191 N-gamma or iridium-192 per section 370 bonds. And typically 1 gram of irradiation, iridium-191 has iridium-191, 37% abundance, other one is 193 iridium. About 144 curie of 192 iridium you get in a month's time of irradiation. Similarly, you have sodium-24 and bromine-82 are major isotopes of interest for use in industry as tracers. They are produced by activation of sodium carbonate and ammonium bromide targets respectively in the reactors. I will not intrude into the other aspect of nuclear medicine, but the therapeutic radioisotopes are used in treatment of cancer in the form of teletherapy, brachytherapy, and radionuclide therapy. And there is a huge requirement of radioisotopes for this purpose in view of the large number of cancer deaths in the country. Some of the isotopes are used in therapy: 153 samarium, 46 hours, 152 samarium N-gamma, 166 holmium, 26 hours, 186 rhenium, 90 hours, yttrium-90, cobalt 64 hours, yttrium-89 N-gamma, or strontium-90 going to beta minus to yttrium-90, 198 gold, 197 N-gamma, 177 lutetium, 176 N-gamma, or 176 ytterbium N-gamma followed by beta minus decay. Now let's discuss some of the isotopes which produced in cyclotrons. Gallium-67 is used for imaging of soft tissue tumors produced by two routes: irradiation of enriched zinc-68 with protons 20 to 25 MeV by zinc-68 P2N gallium-67, or irradiation of natural copper with alpha particles, copper-65 alpha-2N gallium-67. Of course, natural copper also contains copper-63, and which will give rise to gallium-67 or gallium-66 or 65. So, which are allowed to decay before using the radioisotope of gallium-67. Thallium-201 is used for imaging of heart functioning produced by proton 30 MeV. Irradiation of thallium-203 P3N, 201 lead, beta minus decay, 201 lead. As the it is beta plus decay or electron capture. As the abundance of thallium-203 is 29.5%, you require enriched thallium-203. 123 iodine is another isotope used for imaging of thyroid. It is produced by 27 MeV proton irradiation of 124 tellurium P2N. Again, 124 tellurium has very low abundance, 4.6%. So you require enriched target of 124 tellurium. Alternatively, you can use 124 xenon P2N, 123 cesium, and subsequent beta or electron capture decay to 123 iodine. However, the abundance of 124-denon is very low, 0.1%. So it requires enrichment of 124-denon to about 99%. And also to avoid the impurity of 125 iodine, which has got a half-life of 60 days. 109-minute F18 used in PET imaging and produced by 10 to 16 MeV proton irradiation of enriched H2O18 target. Yield of this isotope production is 6 millicurie per microampere hour. Usually you will have 100 to 200 microampere hours, so you can have almost a curie of this one. It is the most widely cyclotron produced radioisotopes in diagnostic nuclear imaging. Lastly, you see, you will find iodine has got several isotopes which are finding applications. So some of the nuclear properties of iodine isotopes I just listed here. Iodine 123, 13.27 hours, electron capture. 124 iodine, 4.176 days, electron capture. 125 iodine, 59 days, electron capture. 126 iodine, 13 days, electron capture, beta minus also. 127 iodine stable, 131 iodine, 8 days. So, and particularly iodine will go and sit in the thyroid. So, thyroid imaging and treatment, many isotopes of iodine are very suitable for thyroid imaging. Okay, so that's all I had to add today.